Okay, we're starting.
I just
Ready,
roped
go.
into this today, so this
Go.
is,
Ready, go.
yeah. I remember when I learned how to do this thinking that this was actually really useful because when you want, sometimes you want to be able to make the half square rectangles to put into your quilts, and you don't want to cut the rectangles themselves and have to sew on the stretchiness because that's no fun. Having to worry about that, and I don't use starch, and those who do, it's not as big of a deal, but I don't use it. And those who have the cutter, you can do it as well, and it's really easy to make it, but still, this is a really, really good thing to be able to know how to do. And now there's two different ways to do it, and one kind of gives you a thicker end to your rectangle, and one gives it a little bit thinner. When you look at any tutorial on Pinterest or anywhere you're looking at the tutorials, there's absolutely no set add 1 1/4 inches this direction and add 1 1/2 inches this direction, like with half square triangles. And one of the and a huge important thing to do when you square this up, you don't square it up exactly where your point is in the corner, because this isn't a perfect 45-degree right. It's not a 45-degree angle with where your fabrics meet in the corner. So the first thing you want to do, you do want to figure out what size you want, and I found a few different sites that say how much to add. So it's kind of like, on average, this is what you want to add, and just understand you might end up trimming a little bit off, or you might end up trimming, a 1/4 inch off as well. So if you understand that to begin with, it's like, oh, okay, I can work with these measurements. So this one that I found, right here said to add. Oh, I didn't click on the link, sorry. It said to add, you want to add 1 1/4 inches to there we go. You want to add 1 1/2 to the short measurement, so along here, and you add 1 3/4 to the long measurement of your finished size. So that is where you start. You add, again, 1 1/2 to the short and 1 1/2 to the long of your finished size. So if you want it 4 by 6, if your finished size is 4 by 5, then you would cut it 4 1/2 by 5 1/2. Okay. Let's see. Now I'm going to go to this one because it was really, really helpful. The most popular way, I think, is to draw your line from corner to corner. Okay, that is the most popular way. It's a good way. Now, the biggest thing is, or there's a lot of biggest things, sorry. Something to remember, you don't do this. Don't do this. You don't line it up like this. You will get a lovely little diamond shape. So let's pretend that's sewn together, and this is what your shape is going to end up looking like when you cut it in half.
Oh.
You do not sew it so it's stacked on top of each other. You get a diamond. Okay? I remember doing this the first time, going, oh, I can do this. I can do half square triangles like this.
Yeah.
Mom, what happened? Okay, so what you do is you match up opposite corners.
Oh, I've never seen that before.
Right?
It's crazy.
So you twist it, and you go opposite corner, opposite corner. Now, when you do half rectangle triangles, they end up the same direction.
Okay.
They half squares, whatever. You can twist and go any direction. Look, they're the same. You can't. Like they're not gonna. You need to have it if you want to make a triangle.
Yeah.
You want to make a triangle like this? Notice it doesn't work. Okay, they make two the exact same. So if this one is facing, left to right, you want to make sure the other one is opposite. And I have the line drawn already, so it's already messing me up. See, I already have my line drawn to do it the other way. Right.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yes, there we go, right there. My line's throwing me off. Okay, so you have to do them opposite in order to be able to do like a mountain shape.
Oh, okay.
So you make two that are the exact same.
Mirror image would be good too.
Yes, mirror image, thank you.
Instead of mountain.
So you up one and a half here and 1.5 here.
I think one was 1.5 and
She said
1.75.
something and then 1.5 later, so I'm confused.
Okay, you're right. I said it wrong.
Okay.
The short side, for the short measurement, you add 1.5 to your finished size.
Okay.
The long measurement is 1 3/4.
Okay.
So they are a little different. Now at the same time, you could probably, you gotta play with it. You gotta find what works, whatever size you want to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, so again, this is the most popular way where you can just line up the corners and then you sew a 1/4 inch again. And this is where you guys messed me up here. Okay, this one. Okay. So when I drew the line corner to corner, this is what they look like. I cut the exact same size squares, and if you notice, this one's just a little thinner. Okay, and this is the second method I'll show you. When you square this up, again, do not square it up so you're putting that corner directly in that corner. You don't want to put the corner here, because otherwise when you sew your 1/4 inch, it's not going to meet in the corner. You're not going to have nice corners. It's going to be a funky looking corner, and it's the reason why I didn't want to start quilting, because I like my corners really nice. Okay, so what you do is you offset it all, and actually this site that I just found was amazing, and what they said to do is first you make your sides parallel. Okay, so you're going to make your long sides parallel, then you twist it, and you pull the ruler so that where a square ruler would be a lot easier, because it will have your lovely little perfect 45-degree angle, and you're going to pull it until where the 1/4 inch meets is on your line. Okay, so this is a little off, and I'm here. Let's see if I can get the. It's just not gonna. Here we go. We're gonna pretend that our 1/4 inch is a dot, my invisible dot. So I would trim it right about there. So you pull it to where the 1/4 inch, where the 1/4 inch meets. You know, that lovely little line on a square. Your 1/4 inch meets right on your line, and that's where you will trim across, and it will give you just enough on the outside to make it. It will give you just enough on the outside and just enough, and this one, you know, it's just a little off because my sewing isn't, you know, perfect. It will give it just a little off to where when you do sew it together in 1/4 inches, you will have a nice meat in the corner. Okay. The other way.
The website.
This one is actually the modern Quilt Guild. I typed in half rectangle triangle tutorials on Pinterest, and there's hundreds of them. Really. This one is one of the better ones, and hopefully we can just link it. I wonder, they'll let us link. Well, hopefully that Modern Quilt Guild will let us link to there, so we'll figure out if we're able to do that. Now, the other way to do it, and this is the more popular, not the more popular, the more accurate, the updated way to do it, I guess you could say. First thing you do is you're gonna mark dots. You can see I have 2 dots marked, and those dots are marked at a 1/2 inch. And so I put it at a 1/2 inch on there. I put a dot. Then I put a 1/2 inch dot on my other side. And then you draw a line through your 1/2 inch dots. And what you can see is that it is not centered. Okay, it's just, see the line that goes through my 1/2 inch dots? It's not centered. Now, I was sewing on a machine that didn't have a 1/4 inch foot, so I went ahead and drew lines where I would sew. Okay, so then you guys can see where you would sew. And it's the same, when you trim, you're gonna do the same trimming method. This is a more accurate way of doing it. But it's a lot more like fussy, a lot more into it to try and line it up perfectly, you know, the 1/2 inch and all that. But either way will make half square triangles. And so these 2 were done with the one line from corner to corner. And then these 2 were done doing the 1/2 inch in.
But you do the same with these.
Yes, you want to make.
You do the black like that.
Yes, you want to make sure that as you line it up, they are opposite. Opposite.
Okay, 1 minute warning. Please
There we go.
wrap up your presentation.
Thank you.
Well done, Elly.
I learned
Look,
something.
look these look the tutorials up. They'll give you better numbers. But this, I mean, this works for long, skinny ones. Works for, you know, just barely rectangle ones.
Thank you.
We're here to show you the applique quilt cutter and hexagons, and a couple different ways of doing it. So the applique quilt will cut the paper, but it's cardstock. Okay, because then once the cardstock is cut, where did my example go? Oh, it's here. Here we go. Let's do one of those. Then she's cutting the cardstock at the smallest size and the fabric at the next one, and you just use a glue stick.
Sure it sticks to the finger
Instead of your finger, you notice that it stuck to my finger. Thank you very much. And I like to do it across from each other. And don't get it near the edge, really, because you don't want to have to stitch through it with your needle. And then you would take them once you have two finished and ready to go. And of course, there we go. How are we doing over there?
I think I've got a.
You've got plenty for me, yeah.
Yeah. I want to learn how to do it.
So then there's my piece, and you would put them together, and you can either whip stitch or a ladder stitch. A ladder stitch goes down one side and then crosses over and goes down the other side, and then crosses back over and goes down and crosses over. So you're kind of making a stitch that's more like a ladder rather than a whip stitch that just goes around and around. And then you pull it tight. And
What about by machine? Have you ever done it by machine?
I wouldn't do this by machine because you don't want the paper in there, but this is a way that you can just cut the hexagons and you put it on a solid piece of fabric. They show these on Pinterest all the time. And then you just stitch across and across and across and across and across, and it's like not completely down on the corners, so it has a little bit of texture to it, a little bit of three-dimension quality, and then it's just finished, done, deal. So it's very modern, raw edge kind of thing. This is another way to do it too that Reba likes to do, and she brought pictures on her phone. You would cut out the hexagon and cut out the smaller size, and you cut out a piece of batting the same size as this and layer it together. Do you want to just show your phone around like that for me? This is my Vanna. There we go. And then you turn it under and turn it under, and then you would stitch it. Do you stitch it as you go, or do you do it all with pins? I think you do it all with pins. Yeah. So then press it.
Hey, a video of a phone.
Put
That's
this one
awesome.
under.
There we go.
A video of a phone. And then turn it and pin it. I had a pin here a little while ago. Ooh, here's one. Or those clips would work good too, somebody mentioned.
Yeah, I like those clips.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, the better.
Better
Those
than
are
these
perfect.
tiny, these are called applique pins.
Those are
They're very
perfect
tiny.
pins. Yeah.
Yeah,
Those are good
the
to
little
have.
tiny ones that you never know, they're good for stuff like this.
Yeah, me too.
But now they sell them in their
My feet
applique
find 'em
pins.
really well.
Yeah. So you work your way around and you just turn it under and under, and then it's finished, and you put two of them together. You know what, let's do. Yeah, and you have, you
have
just
it all
whip it
done.
together, and it's all done because the batting is already in it, ready to go. So you make a little like hot pad or something like that. Anyways, we'll get another one made.
So it's almost like a cathedral window.
It really has that effect of a cathedral window hexagon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So rather than the square.
This one is black on this side, and it'll be red with black around the outside.
Yeah,
of it.
framed on this side. And then you connect them to make.
So there's no waste.
or a little tiny.
Yeah, really, it's that small batting.
All right, so these are some that have been finished and the paper has been taken out.
Now, how did you attach those to the fabric? Just hand whip
Just
stitch?
a hand whip stitch, yeah.
That's pretty.
Applique stitch, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Pull
pretty.
it up, Reba.
And then
okay.
cut out the back to make it less.
And then I went ahead and cut out the back to make it less bulky.
I was gluing mine like that, and but now I do 4 stitches, just like this.
Yep.
Take the papers out, iron it, you're done.
Uh-huh.
And then you don't have to mess with the papers. You can reuse them over and over and over.
That's another way. Yeah.
Especially if you're traveling somewhere and you don't want to carry the stack of papers.
Yeah, well, I get them all prepared, and they're in that case somewhere in my house at home right now, because I have a whole bunch of this color of fabrics, and they're all ready to be stitched together, and they're real citrusy, and they look great.
This box is that yours?
And
cherries?
No cherries.
No cherries?
Yes, but there's another box of some that are finished, ready to be stitched together. So I don't know quite yet if I'm doing. I'll have to find it and show it next time. You know what? We'll put it in the. Okay. Well, then I'll call you. Oh, do you have text?
It's an earring. How
Okay,
cute
I'll
is that?
text you with it. I'll write that down.
Earring. How cute
Yeah.
is that?
I found the other one at my house. So now I know they came out of here. Thank you for having that on video for me.
No problem. Thank you, Jeri.
Yeah, but I just
All right.
We're making these blocks, and these blocks, I have 2 blocks sewn together. So what we're making is we're using this quick curve ruler. It's by So Kinda Wonderful. They were at Rode, and I just was fascinated by the way they were feeding it through their sewing machine. I thought I could never do that. Well, after YouTubing it for a long time, I decided I was gonna do it. So pretend that this was 10 inches long when I started. And I know that my width is 8.5 inches. So I come here and there's a little, I better put my glasses on or we're not going anywhere. I know that there's 8.5 inches there per the pattern. So once I cut that end piece off, let's just pretend that it's like this. Okay, I'll actually do it. We'll pretend that I cut that end off. And what I do is I set it in between my 8.5 inches, and I want to get this as close to the end as possible to get rid of one cut. And that's going to be here.
Is it hard to get the ruler, the cutter to bend like that?
It doesn't bend, no. And the ones that are up are a little bit easier to work with the ruler, but I like, this is me, where this is my hand. So it's an extension and I just can't get rid of it. So, so now once I've cut that beginning one, I go back and I position that. There's some dotted lines here. There's my 8.5 inch registration. And now all I do is just keep going.
Okay.
You know, you go, and then you take it away and you go to the next one, and you can have about 4 to 8 pieces depending on how good your ruler is, how good your cutter is. So right there I just cut already 4 pieces. So we're gonna take that and let me show you. We'll take these blocks I already cut in advance. I cut them 8.5 by 3.5 per the pattern. There's about 4 of those in there. And so I'm gonna go and I'm gonna cut to make them this way. So I'm gonna find my 8.5 again. You can see the 8.5s in here. And I'm gonna find my 3.5, which is right here. And I'm gonna line it up, and this is upside down because I'm not seeing any of that. There we go. There we go. No notes upside down. And I'm like, oh my goodness, there it is. Okay, there's the 3.5. There's those 8.5 registration lines.
But it's upside down.
No, it's really not.
No, it's
Okay, so you're supposed to flip it over.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I can go like this too. It would be the same thing. And that's why it doesn't matter if your fabric is right side up or not. Because this
Symmetrical.
is now gonna go like this or like that or like that. So it doesn't matter. So now I have that one that was cut out, my little yellow one somewhere, but we'll use this one. Pretend it's yellow because I just think I threw it in the pile. And we're gonna put our pattern together. But I don't sew anything until, so this is what the pattern's gonna look like with this little piece in the middle, like that. So now this is where it all comes together. So I want this to be sewn in like that. Okay. Okay. But there is. So you go like this and you start down about 1/4 of an inch.
In.
No pinning, just 1/4 of an inch. No pinning. Oh no, pinning will make you crazy. So what you do, get that 1/4 of an inch. That might be the hardest part of this whole thing. You put it underneath. Set your needle. Okay, I'm gonna hold with my right hand the bottom, and I'm gonna gradually hold the one with my left hand, and as I start to go, I'm concentrating right here on this 1/4 inch line right there. I'm not even looking at my needle. And I'm gonna start to sew, and I'm gonna feed them together. The bottom one I'm just guiding, and the top one I'm laying over the bottom. And
It's so amazing when you do
Black
it.
magic.
It's amazing when you do
Look at
it.
that.
It comes together so easy.
and you don't even realize it. Now sometimes if it gets a little cattywampus or you get ahead of yourself, you can go ahead and lift that foot. That needle is buried in there, and you lay it back down, and you just go, and you can start going really fast.
We're not even using a walking foot, it's just going.
No, it's just going. The end part is the hardest. So then you lift up, and we're gonna, oops. This is my travel machine, so it's not like my
You don't clip, you don't do
I
anything.
don't just, and then this one, I know this one's my bottom piece. I just have done it so long. So I know I've got to get those two together. So here we go. We're gonna flip it. We're gonna do it 1/4 of an inch.
Melts together.
And you're gonna,
I've done Drucker's path, so it's very similar.
Oh, okay, good.
let me get it up.
You done it, Samantha?
I've done Drucker's path, and it's
could
it
kinda just
has
like,
a
you know.
tighter,
Hi.
it's harder to get it to pull around. But oh my gosh, once you've done like you get it together
feeding it.
once, you're hooked.
You're just
It's
feeding
so
it,
easy.
and it goes so fast. It really does, and it's so forgiving.
It is.
So then I'm just feeding it in, and my eye is right here. I don't know what the needle's doing, but my eye is right there, and I'm trying to keep these two together, and that's where it goes. And if my needle comes right out at that point, I know I've done a really good job. So depending on whether you want your pattern highlighted in the middle, or if you want to showcase this fabric is going to determine how you iron. So if I wanted this to be highlighted, I'm going to do both of them in.
Oh, to
If
pop
I'm
it
going to
out.
do that outside, then I'm going to do both of them out. I've been doing mine just straight. So, like just kind of like I am wanting to get it done. That's kind of my theory.
And you don't do any clips?
No clips yet. I'm going to show you. We're going to square it up right now. Nope, we're going to square it up right now. This is where magic happens. So this is bigger than my 8 by 8.5. It's going to be 8 by 4 by the time it's finished. So I'm going to turn it like a C here, and I have marked on my ruler where I'm going to square it up to. Okay. So I know that I'm going to put that dot there, and this dot is the 8. Somewhere on this curve, I need to make those 2 points match that it fits within this 8 by 4. It sounds complicated, but it's not. So I'm gonna put this one here and this one here. They're both touching and there's 1/4 of an inch beyond it. That's gonna be my seam when I put these two together. So there's my seam will take up that slack. So I put it on the 1/4 of an inch here, 1/4 of an inch here, and they both touch that arch, and they're both
Okay,
in the 8 by
3-minute
4.
warning.
We're almost finished. So I take that away, and now I have a squared up piece. I gotta do the bottom, and that's easy because it just sits in the 8 by 4. Here's my 8, here's my 4, and I cut off everything else that's left over.
Okay,
I
and
didn't
what
cut that.
kind of quilt do you?
Let me show you. Glad you asked. I can't wait to see the end. So this was why I bought it. Was I did this? This is the panel, the block. Yes. And this is the quilt. The pattern is a little bit different than what I'm doing here. This is just a table runner here, but you can do this. And what I did instead of, you know, that 8.5 by width of fabric where I was cutting all my C's, I pieced strips together, which formed these. So I cut these all out at the same time. You just sew 5 of them together, and you square it up to where it's 10 inches by width of fabric, and you just keep cutting, and then they become your pattern. And then if you'll hold that for me.
But then this is
the
different
log
now.
cabin quilt I just finished 2 nights ago. And I cut the logs. So you can tell. Yes, that'd be great.
It was
So
a
I-
long cabin and then you
So
cut
yeah,
the
I cut
corner.
the corner, and then I added this piece, which is also cut with that. Put them together, squared it up, sewed them together, and this is another wedding quilt that I'm doing. And then I did this about 40 minutes before I came to class with the same ruler.
Do you have
I
that?
didn't have a chance to sew it together, but it's the poinsettia. It's a free pattern that they offer, and it's yeah, just something I put together with a real, just to show you how quick it is. It's very quick. So, and the website is so kind of wonderful, and I met them at Rode, and I just fell in love with the fact that they could make something very
Okay,
traditional,
should be wrapping up our
very
conversation.
modern. Yeah, thank you. You're welcome.
Hello, Barbara. What are you showing us today?
There. It didn't matter if you smiled.
I'm showing love.
Tell them, not me.
Okay, those of you that have already been here, move along.
Oh, I gotta go.
You're gonna miss your next thing.
We wanna see this.
Okay, so how many of you have done wool applique before? Yeah. We've got one convert up here, and I converted her. And she's done it. You've done? Yeah, you've done some. Well, great, you've done some. Okay, good, good. Well, I'll kind of cover all the real basic stuff because we got just a few minutes here. All right, so I brought a bunch of projects that I've done over here. What is that? This and that. Here's a little candle mat. Another candle mat that has part of its fabric and part of its wool applique. You can look at them later if you want and see what all is going on here. But I have used 2 different things for backgrounds. I like using flannel because it's cheaper than wool. A lot of the patterns will call for wool for a background, for a large background like this, and that can get expensive. You can do it. I mean,
If you can
that's
find
fine.
the pieces.
Well, you can buy
Sometimes
it
you
by
can't
the
find
yard.
Sometimes you can't find them big enough in the color. you
That's
want.
true, yeah, or the color you want, right. So I use flannel a lot, and you'll see that a lot of pieces are kind of a combination of wool applique and fabric. So it's kind of cool because it gives a lot of texture and different looks to things. And then you've got, like, that's more realistic. This is more fanciful. And this particular Reed's Rags is the company, and she does these, what they call primitive, which are just kind of goofy, you know, goofy stuff. So I brought a bunch of different patterns from a whole variety of different companies, so you can kind of see what their styles are. Some of them are just little tiny candle mats that are really simple and easy to make. And I am in the midst of making, I guess you'd call it a candle mat. It's a little Christmas thingy here. And but before I get on with that, I wanted to show you the different kinds of wool. All right, there's basically 2 kinds of wool that you can use, and one is a felted wool, and one is wool felt. Okay, so felted wool
How it's backwards.
is fabric that has been woven. It's woven wool, like you would find in a garment. Actually, this was a garment. This was a garment. I went to thrift store and found stuff that's 100% wool and took it all apart and washed it in really, really hot water and put it in a really hot dryer for a long time. And what that does is it kind of shrinks it and pulls the fibers together.
Do you have to do that with wool felt?
Yeah.
It's already done.
Yeah. So felted wool is woven fabric that you have felted by applying heat. And then wool felt is, and I've got a couple pieces here, is it's actually wool fibers, just fibers that have been put under a lot of pressure and heat and made into felt. And this looks similar to the like craft felt that you see at Joann's and stuff, but it's made out of wool, so it's a little different. This will not ravel. The edges don't ravel at all, so it's kind of nice to use for little small pieces. You know, I honestly don't remember.
So you buy them in the sheets like that?
Yeah, these you buy typically, or you can actually buy it by the yard. There are some places you can buy.
$1.79.
Some places you can buy by the yard. I know that Primitive Gatherings has wool felt and wool by the yard. Both.
Can you tell the difference between the regular felt and the wool felt?
Well,
How do you test it?
feel it.
The texture.
The texture?
Feel the two. You can tell this.
Yeah.
That's felted wool. That's wool felt.
soft. Yeah, it's
So
soft.
I'm saying
It's soft.
Okay, you're on your last
the
5
felt that they
minutes.
sell in the, like Joann's.
Oh, it's
You have to
it'll
read
say
the
on it.
label.
It'll say on it
You
with
have to read the
polyester or
label.
something. Okay, so you can see this was a piece of a jacket or something that I took apart, and this was a skirt, you know. And this one now, see, is going to ravel. So I would definitely use fusible on this. I would use fusible. Some people do not like to fuse. People, that's all they want to do is fuse. I like to fuse. So it's a personal preference as to whether or not you fuse your pieces onto your project. This actually was a sweater that my son-in-law didn't want to give up. My daughter finally snuck it out of the closet because it had moth holes in it. And it was 100% wool, and it was so cool. It was the prettiest color. So I fused it on a couple different things I've cut out. It's thick,
And
you
who's
know.
recognized it on your projects?
Kidding, he's not that observant. Okay, so
What kind of fusible?
I use soft fuse.
But does it stay
called
when,
soft
once you
fuse. Yes.
adhere to the fabric?
Yes. Okay, so let me cover a couple other things first before I get into the actual how you do it. There's a couple different kinds of thread that you can use. There is pearl cotton, which comes in a couple different weights. There's a 5, an 8, and a 12. The 5 is the thickest, and the 8's kind of in the middle, and it's pretty nice. And 12 is the thinnest. And I prefer 12, but it's everybody's kind of their own preference. It also comes variegated, like in a variegated thread. And it comes solid. So, in just every possible color you can think of. Every possible color. Of course, when you start buying this, you're going to have lots of thread.
Where do you buy it?
I get this at Primitive Gatherings, but you can get it online. Birdbrain, Cocoon carries this. They do not carry any wool felt at all, or felted wool.
Valdani, is that Valdani?
Valdani or DMC. This DMC. I think Joann's does have some DMC, but it's very limited colors, very limited.
They don't have
Okay.
good colors like that. Those are good
So
colors.
that's that, and then I use chenille needles. They're called chenille needles, and these are a size 24. I think they come in a 22 or 24, and they have a very large eye. If you can see it or not, it has a very large eye, so that makes it pretty easy. You can also use embroidery floss, just regular old embroidery floss, which is a lot cheaper, and it comes in variegated and lots and lots of colors. But do not use the full 6 strands. Break it apart, either 2 or 3 would be the max that I would use. Okay, so the process then, if you're using fusible, would be to take your fusible and you can tell the stickies on the one side, the paper's on the other. And one thing you have to make sure is that your pattern has been reversed. And it usually will say on the pattern whether it's reversed or not. Some of them it doesn't matter. This one does not matter because it doesn't matter which way it's
The
going.
snowman is a snowman.
Yeah, that's it, right. And even some of these that, like this one, okay, if you were to do that chicken the other direction,
Who cares?
what difference does it
Just
make,
eat
right?
that.
So, just peck them the other way.
Yeah.
Okay, so you take your fusible, you lay it over your pattern piece, and you trace around on the line, okay? There is no seam allowance at all, because you're using raw edge. And you cut this maybe 1/8 of an inch out, and then you take it, and once you have done that, you put it on the back of your wool. Although there really is no back or front to a wool, so it doesn't really matter. So I've already fused that on. You iron it on, and it'll give you directions on your fusible, what temperature and whether you use steam or not. Some of them don't use steam, some do. So I've already fused this on there, and then I've cut out part of it, and then you peel this off, peel the paper off, and now that sticky is actually, it doesn't feel sticky, but it's on the back. So then you just take that and you put it down on your piece, and you iron that down, and it'll stay. It'll stay right there. I like using fusible, especially when you're using little tiny pieces. You know, there's his carrot nose, right? That's going to be hard to put on there without fusing it. So, and these little skinny, I've got the tree stem, and then all these little branches that are going to be on there. They're pretty small too, so I put fusible on those. Okay, if you do not want to fuse, yes.
Your fusible will go on the back of your pattern, but how do you fuse it to your?
To here, you iron it again. You iron it.
Turn it over another fusible layer?
No,
It's
no,
double-sided.
it's got it here. It's already come off the paper. Once you iron it onto your wool, you iron it onto the wool, then you peel the paper off.
Okay.
So now the fusible's on here. You put it down and you iron it again. Okay? So if you do not want to fuse it, there's a couple of other ways to do it. You can use freezer paper. So you can put that part down and trace around it. And cut that out and iron this onto your wool. It will peel off and it doesn't stick, but at least it stays on the wool long enough to cut it out. And or you can use a glue stick, or you can use this kind of stuff, any kind of a sticky anything. Just put a couple little dots on it to hold it in place. And then you just use a variety of embroidery stitches. And usually it'll tell you in the pattern what kind of embroidery stitches to use. Usually it's just 3 or 4. It's not anything super fancy.
Do you ever use a machine?
Not typically on wool. No.
Thank you, Barbara. We're proud of you.
Thank you.